Right. All right, let's get settled. It's time. Down in front. What? All right, all those back row people. Anyway, welcome to Exploring Consortial Interoperability. We have with us, well, I'll let them introduce themselves. I won't steal any thunder. After the session, come find me and I will stamp your little card. Okay, and so here, take it away.
Yes, with all of them. Unless you want to do introductions on
Thanks for being here. We're excited to be here, and we're very thankful we are in this room together because that took a minor miracle. Here we all are. Thanks. So we are talking about exploring consortial interoperability as part of ASERL. So that's the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries. Okay, yeah. And we are.
Hello, I'm Courtney Taulbee, and I'm the head of Interlibrary Loan and Document Delivery at the University of Kentucky Libraries.
I'm Rebecca Crist. I am a program coordinator for shared collection resources at the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries, or ASERL. Almost forgot the title there for a second.
I'm Amy Chu. I'm the Director of Collection Management and Sharing at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
And I am Robyn Weisman, and at the moment, I am the Director of Resource Sharing for Vanderbilt University Libraries.
All right. One up first. Oh, there goes my. I've lost my script here. Okay, so first off, a couple warnings while I get this pulled back up. I tend to speak very, very quickly, and I've had 3 cups of coffee today. So if I get going real fast, somebody just raise your hand. This was all ready to go, and then I touched a button and everything has gone away. So let me just jump in. And while there also, is there a Wi-Fi for this conference? Does anybody know? I didn't get any networks at all coming up, so I might be winging this a little bit.
There is a public network.
Okay.
And then I'm connected to together.
I do, and it's not coming up. Okay, well, all right, well, let's see how this goes. Hi, I'm Rebecca Crist. I'm from ASERL. ASERL is the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries. We are 39 libraries across the Southeastern United States. There's our locations and our list of libraries. They're all R1 and R2 libraries. Let's see if I can zip it a little bit. Across the greater Southeast. We are a library consortium focused on shared needs and challenges for academic libraries. Our deans get together and talk about things that are important to deans. We are heavily into professional development. We do a lot of webinars and resources on professional development, including a lot of things around diversity that some of our universities are not able to tackle on their own at the moment. We have peer groups for a number of areas of the library, including collection development, scholarly communications, accessibility, special collections, government information, shared print, and of course, resource sharing. So we have a few different programs that we run for our resource sharing options. At our base level, all ASERL members are part of a base level agreement saying that we agree to share with each other with I believe it was originally a 48-hour turnaround, but I think now it's up to 24 hours on processing. It also plays into our group mentality of we host community calls for our peer groups. We bring people together to try to have more conversations. We collect group stats. Then we have our kudzu group, kudzu, the vine that ate the South. It connects our libraries. We have 24 libraries participating in kudzu, or 25, sorry. And I should mention our base program includes 39 institutions, but it's 42 libraries, including a couple of law and medical facilities. Kudzu is 25. They agree to no fee exchanges and expedited shipping, as well as expedited turnaround processing time. And there are some additional stats that we collect with them. Then we have it's not up here, but we have an in-kind agreement with the Washington Research Library Council, WRLC, to do some reciprocal borrowing with them for no fee lending. We run a rapid pod, which is open to all of our members. And we do have a FedEx courier that about 5 libraries take care of. A rapid pod includes 44 libraries. I forgot to mention that, including some affiliates and some other state libraries. So what? I thought I would give you a picture of what ASERL ILL has looked like over the last dozen or so years. These are based off of OCLC, borrower, stats, and rapid. And there's a couple of interesting things here. I'm just going to abandon the script and tell you. You can see, as expected, that lending goes down over time. And this is very similar to what Marshall showed you this morning, that there were we're about a third of where we were in fiscal year 2012 in terms of transactions. And this is in kudzu, it's our in-group borrowing. And what really intrigues me is that I expected to see borrowing drop off a lot around the pandemic, but it dropped and then very much leveled. And I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure if it is that this is where lending and borrowing will be in our group from now on, that this is the base level of things that are not electronically available or are primarily held in these universities, and these are just going to be what continues to get borrowed and loaned. Or if, as I was saying in the question and answer this morning, this is the base level of stats that we're collecting in the transactions that we're collecting in the stats that we currently collect. If lending and borrowing is moving outside of those traditional pathways that we've collected our statistics in, that's something that I'm looking into. I don't have any answers. You want me to talk about this or you want to jump in?
I think you can go ahead.
Okay, so one of the first things I did when I came was look at what systems and networks our group is using. We overlap with at least a dozen other consortia, including 12 states, and many of them have state consortia, many of them belong to CRL, ARL, other resource sharing networks. And as part of these, they all use a ton of different ILS services, ILL services, discovery services, and we started just sort of collecting information about who's using what. These circles are to scale. That's 0.1 inch equals 1 user. So you can see that we are using a number of different systems in these 3 areas, but we have these huge concentrations in a couple of spots, primarily Iliad and Alma. I believe out of our 39 schools, 38 are Iliad users. It's a big chunk. And then Alma is also, this is a snapshot from last fall, 2023. People are coming onto Alma. A couple of schools are leaving Alma, but Alma is a primary network there. I also then went and looked at who owns them because, as you all know, with the increasing consolidation of vendors, and even actually if it weren't for the increasing consolidation of vendors, these systems don't always play nicely together. If you are entirely an ex libris library, I bet the systems work together much better than if you're trying to knit together a bunch of other systems. So looking at our resource sharing across the ASERL consortium, I wanted to know, where is the friction coming from? What is happening that is decreasing the amount of lending and borrowing we're doing within our group and outside of our group? What's making it hard for our libraries? And one of the things that kept coming up was that some of these systems just don't knit together all that well. So this is where we started looking at this, again, to scale. The big yellow is OCLC, and I included Iliad in that. And then blue is Clarivate. You can see EBSCO and Cersei Dynex in there. But the other thing that struck me is we talk a lot about how invested we are idealistically as a community in open source research or open source tools. And then you look at this and see how little we're actually subscribing to open source tools. Thought that was interesting. Okay, I think that's the end of my bit, and I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
So I'm just going to touch on the motivation for why we decided to pursue interoperability at a consortial level. I became the visiting program officer for ASERL, for expanded resource sharing for ASERL about this time last year. And the resource sharing group, who I put the members up there, that was already in place. So we were all set to go and find the different ways we can best serve the consortia. So you'll see a few of the projects listed, and kind of these all led us to interoperability. Rebecca touched on the systems overview project, so I won't go too much into that, but she and I also conducted an environmental scan with other consortia because we wanted to see what, they were doing or how they handled certain situations, things like that. We asked about CDL or shared licenses, their ebook lending practices. And we found that for the most part, generally speaking, we all were kind of in this, we're curious, we're investigating it, but nobody had found like a solution to whatever topic. So we knew that going into it. And then we also, for this group, conducted a statistics project, which Jacob, I don't know that he's in the room, but he created the metric for it. And it was a project where the members of this group, we looked at a year's worth of our data. And it started, we wanted to know for physical loans, how much we lend and borrow between ASERL members, and then how much we could potentially borrow between members. So we got some interesting data on that. I think it was, oh gosh, I think I wrote it down. Like potentially it was around 73% is what we came to. And we decided to pursue it with articles. That was a little harder because, we're a lot of rapid users, things like that, where it wasn't easy to designate a set potential or, firm way that we could go about it. But again, there was a potential about 84% either through OCLC or through rapid. OCLC ASERL partners or just rapid in general, I should say. So that was interesting data to know. And we were kind of looking at it from the perspective of as we are in the midst of, say, a request for proposals, or we're just wanting to reduce our dependency on a single vendor or product, how can we best serve each other? And then another topic that we focused on was just building community engagement. We increased the number of community calls we held this past year, things like that. And in those calls, we got a lot of feedback about interoperability issues. So again, we were interested in how we could look at it more internally and not just advocating to the vendors our needs. So that kind of led into the creation of the interoperability group. And those are the members that have volunteered to serve on that. And as of right now, both groups, both this group and the resource sharing group, the members are going to stay on for another year. So we're hoping we can kind of expand on some of these initial projects as well as maybe pursue some other things. And I will turn it over to Robyn to talk a little more about what we're doing.
All right, so I'm going to use Vanderbilt as a little bit of a case study in terms of discovering what problems that we identified that needed solving. And I'm kind of going to use ETSU, Eastern Tennessee State University, as an example, because I think that's fairly emblematic of the challenges that libraries might be experiencing going forward. With ETSU, they kind of moved over to Rapido and left OCLC. And it was less than a year that process took place. And clearly they can't email or contact every library to say, this is what we're going to be doing. So it was all of a sudden, we just started getting ALA requests via email from ETSU in our email. And we were getting a lot of them because Vanderbilt is, I believe, the largest by amount of books in the state of Tennessee. I think UT is largest by like space, but I think we have more books. Yeah, right on. Not to brag. Yeah. So we were lending to them quite a bit. And we wanted to maintain that relationship, particularly within the state of Tennessee. Maintaining those partnerships with those libraries were really, really important to us. That being said, getting all those ALA forms at one single time presented a big problem in terms of staff time, because it takes a lot of effort for us once we get the ALA form to put it into our system, and we use Iliad so that we can process the request and have it go through in the normal fashion. So we wanted to investigate options that would allow us to kind of, what we were thinking was taking a step backward towards ALA forms to kind of get ourselves working together so that requests can go through smoothly. They can still request from us quickly and easily, and it's also, we can also fill the requests quickly and easily and maintain our impact. More broadly, that also kind of brought more into focus issues with that we are increasingly seeing with other libraries, smaller libraries within Tennessee. And I think Amy was experiencing the same thing at Tennessee, where more and more of the smaller libraries were able to afford their OCLC bills. So they were leaving OCLC, which makes requesting from us that much more difficult. So it was one thing if we're getting 1 or 2 email requests from a public library, but thinking about it, more and more libraries in Tennessee were leaving OCLC because of cost issues. So it was, in terms of maintaining our impact within the state of Tennessee and even with public libraries, a lot of what we're providing, they can't get anywhere else. And with within the state of Tennessee, if they're coming, we provide a reciprocal relationship with all libraries in Tennessee, but that may not be the case outside of Tennessee. So if we're the only library that whatever the small public library is requesting, that may be the end of the road if we can't supply it, which is also an increasing concern, thinking in terms of, frankly, book bans. Those have been on the rise in Tennessee, across the Southeast, pretty all over. And even with the libraries that are still within OCLC, we're kind of noticing that we were getting requests for books, as they were being banned. We were starting to see influx of requests for them. Mouse was a big example, where once Mouse got banned within some of the public libraries in Tennessee, all of a sudden we were getting slammed with requests for Mouse. And it was really important for us to maintain our impact and to provide access to these kind of materials that users may not be able to get from their local public library. Gay and lesbian, LGBTQ material is another one where we're getting increasing amounts of requests for that because it's no longer available in public libraries. So thinking about that, it was important for us to kind of think about interoperability and how we can best connect with those libraries. The answer that we came to was ISO. It was connecting with those libraries. It enabled us, it works through Rapido, where we can enable a connection, and ETSU, whichever library, can place the request through Rapido and submit it to us. And as long as we have our connection open, then we receive it. And it comes through our Iliad and it comes into its own queue and we can process it, and there's no extra work essentially involved. It comes in, the symbol is a little bit different from the OCLC symbol, but otherwise it comes in and it's pretty standard. Getting that set up admittedly, I'm not clear if it was just our systems department was just that magical and just made it seem quick and easy, or if there was a lot of work involved. The feedback that I've gotten from other ASERL libraries is that it was relatively quick and easy. I think it's possible even for some libraries, depending on where their server is located, that you can just file an OCLC ticket and they can enable that connection and get that going for you. For us, there were a little bit of testing going back and forth with Jennifer Young from ETSU. And I know she's presented about this as well from her side about our experimenting and going back and forth. We had issues with the ISO server address and the URL. At one point we had an Ex Libris ticket open, but all those problems were pretty easily resolved. And we were able to get up and running and are able to continue to serve ETSU in a way that serves both ETSU and us. And also the option is now open where we can connect to other libraries that also are on Rapido. I see Mark Parrish is sitting right here, and he was a big help. He and Andrew Parker. Andrew Parker actually put together kind of like a how to connect to ISO like how-to guide, which was extremely helpful. And we actually got him to speak to some members of ASERL to talk about how to get set up and answer questions and kind of promote that because Brandeis is also totally on Rapido and totally off OCLC. I think they might be one of the, well, I shouldn't say that anymore. They were one of the first libraries to completely leave OCLC. So they were kind of the first ones, the pioneers there to really answer questions. And Mark and Andrew were really great help with that. That also led to discussions more broadly in ASERL, which kind of led to me getting roped into chairing the interoperability group was, is anyone else having these issues? And broadly within their state, but also are any other libraries within ASERL, are these discussions kind of going on about potentially, you know, changing systems, leaving OCLC? And clearly those are not things, I'm not going to stand up here and say, this library is talking about it, this library is talking about it. Clearly not. It was all very clear. It was kind of like, we're all kind of talking about it. This doesn't go anywhere, but there was definitely talk with librarians hearing from their deans, you know, this is something to start to investigate. Where everyone's kind of feeling budget crunches, particularly libraries all over. That's kind of the trend. So thinking about ways to cut costs is an increasing concern, and a big bill is OCLC. Sorry, Peter, but that's kind of what the experience that we've been hearing in ASERL is that there's that big bill there, and there's a kind of investigations into, you know, how to dial that back. And once hearing from other libraries that these were issues that we were going to have to start thinking about, even within ASERL, within our partner libraries, it became an increasing concern to kind of get ahead of that. And so that it doesn't come down to major library leaving all of a sudden. We're getting tons of ALA requests, and or that library is cut off and we're not able to provide services to their users because their dean has dictated that they need to be off OCLC or Iliad or whatever. It was good that we started those discussions, because since we started talking about it within the last year, one of the major lenders, partners within ASERL, George Mason University, has begun migrating over to Rapido. And eventually, this is not disclosing anything that isn't public news, that isn't public, that the plan going forward is eventually they are planning to leave OCLC and be completely reliant on Rapido. So that right there is a big ASERL partner that a year ago, that was not part of the plan, something we were focusing on. We were thinking about other libraries, but now it has become very real very quickly. So it's good that we kind of started the interoperability discussion so that we can kind of be ahead of that. And so I think I will turn it over to Amy now to talk about the rest of this.
I'm sorry that popped up. Okay. So as we're thinking about all these challenges that we're facing and this new landscape of resource sharing, we looked at how we can solve these problems that we're having. And these are some of the tools that we currently have available to us in ASERL libraries that we can consider leveraging. And those ISO connections are kind of the first thing that we've really looked at solidly. And I will say, like, this whole past year has been conversations kind of leading to this point. So we have only, it took us a while to really identify what those issues were. And so a lot of this is us just spitballing a little bit, but that's cool. So something that we found out about pretty recently is capability in Iliad to create Z3950 profiles with other libraries so we can look at what their holdings are and the availability. There's a video on Atlas's training website that goes into that a little bit more in depth and talks about how you can set up ISO. But something that we discovered was, you know, your Iliad system might be hosted by Atlas. We're hosted by Atlas. You might be self-hosted. You might be hosted by OCLC. And then that just kind of wriggles another situation into it as you're getting things set up. So we're going to be working on a pilot project between Rapido and OCLC libraries, connecting, requesting from each other using Iliad, kind of like what we've done with ETSU. But as we encounter those issues like firewalls, like I've been, hey, Mark. I had an email from Drew like 2 days ago at Brandeis because we have been trying to set up with them. He can place requests with us, but my requests aren't going through to him. And so figuring out, is it a firewall issue, those sort of troubleshooting things. I think we would really love to develop a guide in partnership with these libraries that are struggling with the same things that could just say, okay, if this happens, then you can try this to make it work. So that's something we're going to be working on over the next year, I hope. So high in the sky. And then again, those Iliad Z3950 profiles, that's something new I had only just very recently heard about, is that, if they're willing to share that server information, you can see other people's holdings right there from within Iliad. So if, OCLC, your first automation options aren't an option, this could help be that backup that you might need. And then Tennessee, we use Autographics Share It to share, like public libraries share with each other using Share It. And the University of Tennessee has been part of that for a long time. I didn't realize, I came to UT in 2022. I didn't realize that none of the other university libraries were involved in that. And I was like, yeah, like a third of our stuff goes out on Share It. And I was like, what's your stats like? And they're like, none. So I was not surprised to hear that once these smaller public libraries were leaving OCLC, you started getting more ALA request forms. We just got lots of Share It requests, but we do have those imported into Iliad using an ISO connection, and it's easy peasy. We don't have any extra steps that we have to take. So it's been good. It's been good. Now, of course, we are thinking about all these other potential options. And when we think about ASERL as a consortium, I almost think of it more as like a club because we don't have any sort of overarching governance that is happening that conducts, what libraries are choosing to do in terms of systems. So really finding those options where we can all work together. These are some things that we've considered in these discussions that we've had the past year. We've looked at Alma resource sharing, which has peer-to-peer or broker or fulfillment network options. And I did include links to all of this extra info. So when we share the slides out after the conference, you all can explore more as well if you would like to. Project Reshare has been going on for a little while. Currently it's returnables. They are working on a digital aspect of sharing at the moment. OCLC for groups is something that several consortia have explored. As well as OpenRS, which is an open source system. But something that we've heard about recently, and Mark Sullivan just presented on earlier today, is IDS project is developing Crosslink, which is hopefully going to serve as a broker between all these disparate ILL and ILS systems. So that way you can do what you're doing and have been doing, but it'll just happily talk with the other systems without, all these struggles that we're talking about, setting up ISO connections and having to do it one at a time. And it's very, I was happy to see Drew's email, but it's like, hey, I've got a conference and I'm going on vacation. People are busy. I mean, we still have all of our regular jobs to do too. So having some sort of vendor solution like that would be nice. Yeah, Rapido. Yes. Yeah. Yes. We considered that because so many of us are on Alma, but then, University of Georgia, like the whole UGA system is moving away. They're going to Primo. So, or not Primo, you know what I mean. Folio.
Folio, but
One of those
rather
O's.
solution that as far
Yes.
as what we're observing in the field that's working to overcome these obstacles of interoperability.
Yes.
I do want to make sure we give them a shout out.
Yes. Yeah. So we've been looking at a lot. Some of them we think, hey, that could work. As long as everybody's on this system, but as we have learned, more and more people are kind of filtering out, sprinkling out to different systems. So we're just going to keep trying for now. I mean, we said that most all of us have Iliad, but that might not be a forever thing. So finding ways that we can continue to borrow robustly from each other is the idea of what this group has been doing. And then what are we doing next? Okay.
So these are, I'm glad she brought up the kind of club, because as we are all individual institutions, you know, a lot of this is we're just potentially making a recommendation. But some of the stuff that we're looking and exploring are Alma and Alma, Vanderbilt and UK are in the process of looking to set that up between our institutions and do some testing and see how that would work. There's the ISO pilot project that was also previously discussed, so we'll be pursuing our next steps with that and seeing what we learn from that. Of course, community building will always be a focus of ASERL and learning what our members are interested in, particularly for us in terms of interoperability. And then depending on our findings from these things, we may recommend another visiting program officer come on board ASERL for resource sharing and take the lead, you know, maybe a systems librarian or a resource sharing practitioner who is just very interested and has a lot of knowledge in these areas. So that's what we're thinking as of right now, and I'll move it on though. Are there any questions for us?
If there aren't, I have questions for you. So I just wanna.
Yeah, you might turn the tables on you,
So let me ask you all, as members of various consortia and other resource sharing networks, are you running into problems where your systems are not fully communicating with each other and that you are having to step in and manually wrestle with requests and fulfillment? Hands, yeah. Not as much as I would expect. That's really interesting. Okay. When you are setting up your resource sharing pathways, do you prioritize lenders who operate within similar systems? Hands if yes for hands for yes. Okay. The same players. Interesting. Has anybody figured out how to fix it yet? Angelique.
Washington Research Library Consortium, George Mason, meaning the very big news. And I think the first thing I said was, whoa. You know, I've been in librarianship now for about 12, 15 years, and I just cannot imagine a time without. I think one item right now that is still ready or looking to be solved is that our shared collections facility operates as an independent IZ within Alma. I'm sorry, I don't get it. My language is too technical. I honestly don't know how to make it more simple, and sometimes it has to be explained to me again.
Institutional zone is what I think.
Institutional zone. So right now, as they make their move to Rapido, and we're depending on Iliad to send those requests over. Because it's not just this independent IZ, it's a shadow of an independent IZ with the actual item record still reflecting in the home ownership. So we have not figured that out. It has not been figured out. That is it going to operate as an ISO? Maybe. So there's still things to be discovered as we move toward, as GM moves toward, because we're in tandem now with what we don't know, learning what we don't know. I don't know if that answers the question.
It brings up more questions.
It's certainly the area with the question mark that in hand with ex-Libris partners are trying to work toward.
That was going to be my question for you. Is this happening entirely within an ex-Libris environment? Yes. You guys you're all on Alma, right?
Yes, all of us collectively.
Okay.
So I don't know, I can sign and say that yes, there are questions existing, and no, there are no answers yet. Or if there are answers on my level, I don't fully understand yet how it's going to happen. And some of those things I think you just honestly just don't know until you start seeing how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
In real time, and whether or not it's or what those conversations will be. I guess I said yes to the question. Yes, we had a question. I'm concerned.
Okay. My other question is, are there other tools, systems, services, ideas that we should be looking at that we as ASERL have not yet even considered? Are there things that are developing? You're like, why are you asking us? Yeah, go for it.
We City and are on the WRLC, and it went well, and it's working well. And three of our libraries are really enjoying it, and it's great. It's just difficult to onboard other libraries, and not because it's not working, not because we haven't figured out troubleshooting. I think the hump is training and man hours and labor and bandwidth. You know,
Yeah.
this is great, but I am already doing all of this.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have time to learn another way to do the same thing. But I think time is going to answer that question. Eventually, you know, the question of whether or not you're going to onboard it and you have to find time to invest. But peer-to-peer is working. And the group is gaining, that now includes Carly, Pascal, and FLVC, is just gaining more partners.
Interesting.
It's been very successful.
I'm Al Slatka, University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and this might be just a uniquely Tennessee thing, but it's what you all describe as ASERL, but on a much grander scale. There's so many people living in silos, so many institutions living in silos, and so it's great to hear that. But we're not part of ASERL, but still have a pretty robust resource sharing program, and have faced similar things where it was working and it was great, and then I got told to get rid of Iliad by my administration. So we did that 2 years ago, and now we're starting to see a lot of these things. So I feel like it would be remiss to not think about maybe the next phase of the interoperability conversation that's happening at ASERL. How are you going to do outreach to your other resource sharing partners as kind of the leaders, the R1s, the R2s, when you definitely have, I mean, you've got ETSU, MTSU, Memphis that are all on these disparate systems. And kind of like what Angelique said, what's the bandwidth? Like,
Right.
You have to make that a priority at like a statewide level too. Or consortial level. And I think it's just I've seen it as one of Tennessee's weaknesses over the years, that we just haven't had that infrastructure or culture in the past. We're motivated to do it, but it takes a lot of time and effort to solve that problem.
And cash. I mean, that's the lack of time and money and the expertise in different areas, because it's a resource sharing problem, but it's a very technical resource sharing problem. So it involves getting time with your systems library folks, getting times with your programmers, getting times, and if you have them. And that's when I mentioned earlier, sort of the well-resourced libraries versus the less resourced libraries. This is one of the things that I worry about as institutions make decisions. And at the consortial level, we don't hold any of these contracts. We don't have a shared ILS. We don't have a shared index. We don't have any of the ways to make this happen. So it really is just sort of saying, how can we help you connect to each other? What are you using since you've moved away from Iliad?
So all of our resource sharing requests come in through Primo,
Okay.
and they come in through the resource sharing module in Alma. They're either routed through RapidILL, connected that for any physical items. We have not done the will share connection because I transitioned positions and I'm like, that's not my monkeys anymore. But we have our staff manually request those through World Share.
Wow.
And then do a whole manual circulation set of terms of use fulfillment tools in Alma. So it's working great for us, but we do have the staffing and we were able to onboard. We have like 3 or 4 people now, 3 that are regularly managing those from like 7 a.m. to midnight, basically.
They're not doing that full time dedicated, but they are allocated what portion of their role is to keep that service operating.
Interesting. You and then you.
Hi, Sarah Gambrian from Butler University in Indiana. A problem that we've encountered, not just within, we're part of a smaller consortium, just the private academic libraries of Indiana, and then we also have a state academic library consortium as well. And one of the problems we have with resource sharing is getting the bigger universities to basically play ball with us. We have 2 Big Ten universities in our state, and their lack of participation, I think, just within our state consortium, has really limited us to the sharing lines. Within OCLC ILL, we reciprocate, of course, but as we're thinking outside of OCLC and some of the other systems, we can't. There's no communication even to talk about potential new systems that we of resource sharing. Right now, the private academic libraries, we're a shared library system, but there's really no way right now for us to work with the entire state. And this is just within Indiana. So yeah, that's been a huge problem for us.
2 things. 1, you should find me later. 2, one of the complications of working in a library consortium instead of an individual institution is that I am beholden to the people who are paying into our consortium. And that is true for all of them. So I understand the need to say we have to focus on these libraries because these are the libraries who are paying for my time. At the same time, I think particularly in the Southeast, one of my missions when I came to ASERL was I want to build a really robust community across these libraries. I think the Midwest in a lot of ways does there's a lot of libraries in the Midwest. And I think that they do a lot more sort of that community building, but the Southeast faces some particular challenges in terms of both legislative issues, but also just things like hurricanes and that's the Southeast writ large, not just the Bible Belt Southeast, but including Florida, Texas, Louisiana, and making sure that we include the greater region as part of this is definitely something that I am concerned about. One of the ways that we approach that is by knowing that particularly our state universities do have these relationships with their state systems, their other state libraries, and that they are acting, we kind of trust that they're acting in good faith. So that's an interesting point that we should probably just check on that. I don't have any answers though. And then yes.
Mark Sullivan from my projects. We're the ones that are developing Crosslink. And to do with Crosslink is to create an ISO 1866 program system so that disparate systems can communicate. We are in the development process right now. We're going to hopefully have something finished by summer for basic system. We happy to probably have a place that are something that we've seen by several years and decided that we were trying to come up with a solution, and IMLS grant, IMLS gave us a grant that we start doing it, and the next day that's being doing the work for us.
What was our time? Does anybody know what time the session's supposed to? Okay, so we have a couple more minutes if there are any questions. If not, any of you want to say?
I just don't want to say something that actually Amy said months ago in a meeting that I thought was particularly relevant. Just talking about we were going through our kind of issues with thinking about interoperability and kind of discovering who and what is on what system, and all of a sudden you like get an email from someone and then you discover, oh, they're kind of have changed systems. And it's frustrating and it's difficult for all of us. There is no, like, OCLC has a policies directory, so you know what their policies are, where they land, what their deal is. And there is no policies directory for libraries not in OCLC. And by default, they're really, I mean, can't be, because if they're not on OCLC, they may be using any number of systems. And that's kind of, I think, kind of hindering, I think it's particularly relevant, kind of hindering our discussions about this, because it's hard for us if we don't know what libraries outside our consortiums are doing, all those kind of problems. It's harder for us to kind of reach out and work with each other if we just kind of don't know what anyone is doing. I didn't find out until yesterday that UT Martin has moved over to Folio, and UT Martin, that's another in-state school that Vanderbilt works with. So that's something that we're going to need to think about. And we've been working kind of with the Rapido libraries. And so I'm going to need to start investigating. Well, Scott is going to need to start investigating as well, how to connect with Folio libraries from the Vanderbilt side, because now we have that on the horizon. And again, that's another thing where we just kind of found out through the grapevine. So I think that's another big challenge that we're kind of all facing, is kind of everyone kind of finding out through the grapevine how these changes are happening. And it makes us difficult to implement change.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you all for coming. Somebody has stamps.
I have stamps.
Another one. Oh, you're a yeah. You can't say.
No, you're good. You're good. I know, I was like, yeah, thank you.
I listen to myself. I feel like this is.